Thank you for joining me once again in the reading of stories Moshom and Kokom told me by Arnold Isbister. I'm just going to read the next story in this book, which is titled The Warrior in the Woods. Warren was up at 6:30 in the morning. His Moshom had been up since 5, a whole hour and a half already. Waking up early was becoming easier, with no electricity, no TV, and the closest neighbors miles away. Going to sleep early was no problem. Up here in the winter, the darkness came early and left late. This morning was no exception. Looking out through the frost-filled window, he could see it was still dark. A darkness heavy with cold, he thought, and shivered. His small cast-iron bed, with its mattress smelling of smoked hide and sweetgrass, was in the corner of the one-room cabin. Looking to the table underneath, another ice-cloaked window, he could see Moshom sitting in an orange glow of the lamp, highlighted in orange and yellow, wrinkles emphasized by shadows. His face reminded Warren of a famous portrait he saw in some school book. Rembrandt, he remembered. He figured. Mush had been looking at some old photos and holding one now. He seemed lost in thought, lost in memories. With his glasses balanced at the end of his nose, Moshom stared intensely at the gray figure in the photograph. Remembering the story from a long time ago as a child, a smile slowly came across his face. Warren was standing next to him, and now in his long johns and moccasins, looking at the picture. Warren could make out an old woman with hair and braids and her hands down on the shoulders of a small child at her feet. "Who's that, Mush?" asked Warren. "That's my Kokom, my grandmother," he said. "And that's me there," pointing to a skinny kid squinting in the sunlight. "Geez, Mush, you look like a nerd," Warren remarked, laughing. "Yeah, I guess I did," his eyes sparkling with memories. He became silent for a moment, his smile frozen. Tapping at the photo's finger, he said in an almost whisper, "You know, I remember a true story Kokom once told me around the time this was taken." Still tapping at the black and white picture, he looked up and asked, "Do you believe in dreams, Warren?" "I don't know, never thought about it." With a question on his face, he continued, "But some dreams are silly." "Well, at the time, they may not have meaning, but later on, when you're older, they might. My grandmother was a strong believer in dreams. Every morning, she would ask us about our dreams, and after thinking about them, she would advise us on what to do. I think she did this because one time long ago, when she was young, she had a scary dream and didn't pay heed. As she put it back then, she was too young to take anything seriously. But as it turned out, 2 years later, the dream became real. The dream had been a warning. She was younger than you at the time, probably around 10 years old. She'd had dreams before, but not like this one. She says it was like being awake, thinking and feeling things as if she were there. As she slept in the teepee, she kept waking up from short dreams, really short, like pictures. She recalled a yellow sun in one, trees in another, and voices from another. The dreams would startle her awake. She had sweat on her forehead. She would feel around with her hands, feeling the buffalo robe, feeling the sides of the teepee, reassuring herself that she was awake. She then fell into a deep sleep, and she could remember thinking, "I'm dreaming now. I'm awake as another person, but I'm in a dream of my other self sleeping over there." Soon she was in a place of brilliant white. Her feet felt like the cold of the snow. Her cheeks felt the wind, and her eyes watered from the crispness of the air. As she blinked, she became aware of trees around her. White, tall trees and a yellow sun. To her left, she saw white owls and her looking at each other. As they continued to talk, she began to understand them. They talked of her uncle Long Fox, then she stopped and looked directly at her, and she knew in her heart something bad was going to happen to her uncle. While looking at the owl, she could hear footsteps crunching in the snow, and she became aware of somebody to her right. Scared to look but unable to stop herself, she turned and saw a tall, handsome warrior on a white horse, his face in war paint and a white robe over his shoulders. The white horse had war paint on it too, and there was a shield with a white buffalo skull on it. She looked and realized that the warrior was her uncle, Long Fox, and at that moment he turned and saw the owls. Ooh-hoo. Kokom knew that uncle understood the owls and understood their warning, but his pride clouded his reason, for he was a warrior. Not taking heed of the warning, not taking the sign seriously, Kokom knew uncle was doomed. As she realized this, One of the uhu came swooping down at her, and she awoke. Terrified, she sat in silence. After calming down, she called to her gawi, but everyone was asleep. Thinking to herself later, she felt foolish at how scared she had become. I will tell Uncle next time he comes, she told herself as she lay back down. She never did see her uncle again. About 2 years after that, a visitor came and brought bad news. Her uncle, riding his favorite white horse, had gone on a horse raid by himself and never returned. But before he left, he recounted a strange dream to this visitor. He said he had dreamed of having a conversation with owls and of wanting to talk with his niece about something. He had laughed about the dream and thought it was foolish. My Kokom turned away crying at this point and never retold the dream to her parents. It was to me in later years that she told the story when she became old. And it was with great sadness and guilt in her voice. She used to say that sometimes when she went out to collect herbs and back in the winter, that she would hear the owls calling her, and she would hear a wind, a mystic dim, breathing with hooves crunching the snow, but there was nothing there. Just a memory, I guess, like a wind that comes and goes. I sure miss my grandparents and their stories. We're like that, you know, our lives. We as people will come and go like a wind, or as a spark spiraling upwards from a fire. Life is short, but memories are long. This is why I tell you these stories, so that you may pass them on when you are older. Maybe you'll have grandchildren to retell these to. I don't think so, Mush. I hate girls. They're no fun. Just wait. Your thinking will change. You know, I remember. That's the grandson with his Moshom, maybe. Northern Lights, which represent our ancestors, the ones who passed on. That'll be the next story I will read. And yes, dreams do give us messages, and to what I understand, owls, who they give us messages that aren't good, whether it's death or tragic news. Hi for listening.